Welcome back to another episode of the CrySis Queen with yours truly, Renee Graziano. This is a very safe space where you can share. And I'm not here to make light of your trauma, but to make your trauma feel lighter. Today's guest is my girl, Seville.
Hi.
How are you? She's a jewelry designer, and we had to bring these out, fuck around and find out. Absolutely. Made for yours truly by this doll. How are you, love?
I'm good. It's really good to be here, and thank you for having me. I don't do many podcasts, and this is an honor. You're a big queen in New York, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, the proper boroughs, all that. So it's a real treat to just see your come up and everything that you've been through and have overcome, and you pulled your shit together and
thank you.
Kept it together.
I did not keep it together by any means.
Well, maybe it's a work in progress, but it's a journey.
Yes, it's forever a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring you here because you don't, like you said, you don't do many podcasts. Interviews in general, do you?
Not really.
Okay, well then this is a good one. We do talk about trauma, but how we overcome things. And like I said, it's not to make light of anyone's trauma, but it's to make the trauma feel lighter. I've experienced so much trauma in my lifetime, so much violence with my ex-husband that I thought we could have a nice, healthy, open conversation, being that I do know a little of your backgrounds. So if you want to share on how life was and how it is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew up in Queens.
Right.
In the 90s. I did a lot of clubbing at like 15. I dropped out of high school. I got left back twice in the 9th grade. Got my GED. And did a lot of traveling. Came from a really challenging home. My parents are both immigrants. My mother was Cuban, my father was Greek, and they spoke different languages, literally and also emotionally. They spoke.
So how'd that happen? How'd that work in the house with two parents that didn't speak the same language?
So they met on a blind date in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And then got married 3 months later.
Oh, wow.
And bought a house in Queens. And the rest of my family stayed in Bensonhurst.
Okay.
And all my cousins, so I grew up going there.
Right.
And we were the only ones in Queens. And my parents, I think they just found it really hard coming from their backgrounds. My dad had come here illegally. He walked off the boat 1 year after coming here, working on the ships like 10 years. Right. And having done it so many times, that one time he just stayed off the boat. Never went back, took all his stuff.
Wow.
And found a job in a supermarket in Brooklyn. Eventually met my mom, who was a hairstylist. And he was great. She always said he was like great the first 3 months. And as soon as they got married, it was mask off. Oh. And he was a different dude. And he was super, he wasn't very kind to her. And a lot of the things that he did, he wouldn't, he wouldn't be a free man today.
Wow. So he's abusive. He was abusive.
He was on every level, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And I think he was just trapped in his own mind. And he came from Greece. He was the wrestling champion there. His dad was an indentured slave.
Okay.
And had a 3rd grade education. So I think he didn't have the tools to navigate just being a father in a new country. Right. With a woman from another country. And it wasn't really, it was looked down upon to be Greek and to marry somebody who wasn't.
Right. Out of your
Greek. Yeah. Out of your race. Nationality yes. Or whatever. So, and my mom was just so happy to be married and have children. And she was in a bubble. And she was really creative. And she always made things. She made our dresses, our curtains. Right. She was super fly. She was that girl. She kept her outfits in the closet by sweater, pants, cardigan, shirt. Okay. Like her looks. Like she would build her looks.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Super fly. And so I always observed that growing up, and through the violence and through just the difficult upbringing, I always looked to her just trying to make things better with what she had.
Okay.
So with whatever she had in the house, she did pottery, she painted, everything to try to...
Not to interrupt, but the question is, did she come from a good family? Were her parents?
So my grandparents had fled Spain due to the dictatorship there.
Okay.
I think it was Batista, I think. Went to Cuba, settled there, and then lost everything again.
Okay.
So they settled in Cuba, created a really thriving construction business. My grandfather was really successful. They had money. They had the first TV on the block in Cuba. And she was super beautiful. And there's pictures of her. You would think they were shot in Hollywood. Like, she was just stunning.
So she comes from a healthy background.
She comes from, but my grandfather was violent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So she's seen violence before.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I was getting at. I was curious to know.
I think it was subconsciously acceptable for her to, to be okay with that. Because women back then, absolutely. I think, tolerated it.
Women today still do tolerate it. Women tolerate a lot, the cheating, the lying, all of that, so they don't have to go back out there neither.
Yeah.
So I think that's that hush hush is happening to this day.
I'd rather be by myself.
Right.
Rather be alone.
Okay, so she comes from a background that has violence, and then she marries your dad.
Yeah.
And he becomes violent.
Yeah, and he was violent. And he was violent with everyone. And then the whole house became violent. So everybody was violent. The kids were violent with each other. And there was no rest. I felt safer outside with my friends in Queens.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
By the time I was in, 95, as soon as I can get on the train, I was on the train. I was on the Lower East Side, and I was hanging out.
That's where my dad is from.
Yeah. It's so much fun. Such a great place to chill and hang out and just to get to know people.
Right.
It was so neighborhoody, and I just had a ball, and I got into all kinds of trouble. And I met all kinds of really amazing characters and really pushed the line to, like, just a lot of no good. A lot of no good. Okay. And I don't know how I came to be where I am now. I have a great credit score. I pay my taxes on time. I have no debt. All these things. Like, I'm completely domesticated.
Right.
But I was so feral.
Right. So when you said everybody was violent, so he would be abusive to you. And how many siblings do you have?
I have I have two.
You have two. So he would hurt you and your siblings, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, he was like that with everybody.
With everyone that that came in contact?
Yeah, there was never any, like, discussion, like, how are you? What's your favorite color?
Any apologies?
Never.
Never an apology?
Never an apology.
So when you said you all became violent, so the house was just chaos? You lived in chaos?
Yeah, constantly.
But
fear, constant fear.
Oh, fear.
Fear. Ooh. Fear, constant fear. Like, leg shaking fear in my house.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
And I don't know how much of that everybody knew. I don't know what my siblings' experiences were, but that was my personal experience. I was constantly in fear of my life.
Well, I have a totally different outlook on my relationship with my dad than my sisters do, like you just said. So everybody takes things completely different.
You never know. And I'm extremely empathetic as a person in life, at the supermarket, wherever I am. I'm always empathetic. I'm always looking to make sure someone feels comfortable, accepted, and all those things. And I don't know if my siblings are like that. I processed it in a way where I was like, that's definitely not how to be. Right. And that's evident. This is evidence to me that this is not it. This ain't it. The only kind of rescue I felt from it was leaving and being outside and being in the city and being, with my friends and being
a social butterfly.
Being social and dressing well and looking fly and hair done. And, and being kind.
Well, being kind is the key to everything. I think it's the key to a happier life.
Yes.
So how did you move when you finally left home? You obviously took a lot of that violence with you, but didn't act on it within relationships, or?
It did carry over into relationships, and I was definitely the aggressor in this one relationship I had that lasted a long time. I was super in love with him. He's an awesome person. And it's funny because when my mom at some point got sick and I left everything and I helped her, I took care of her.
She has passed?
She's passed on,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
And she had said to me something about violence towards men. And I said, and she said, better him than you.
Ooh.
Better him getting hit than him hitting you.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand it.
Yeah.
My ex-husband was very, very violent. I knew not to put my hands up, though, because I know what would have happened to me. So I'm very against hitting, as everybody should be against it. But it was, for me, it was different. I knew I had to take a seat. Yeah. I couldn't react.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And you have to, when you're dating someone that's volatile like that, you cannot say anything.
Right.
Because if you do,
you know what the next consequence is.
Oh, yeah. There's a famous quote by Margaret Atwood, and she says that men are afraid of being insulted and women are afraid of being murdered.
Ooh. Ooh, that's so drastic.
But it's true. When you think about it, a guy's like, his ego got hurt. You told him he had a little dick. You know what I'm saying? Or he's whack. Or he's not that guy.
Which I made sure to tell my ex-husband every chance I got.
Tiny. Little guy.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, I mean, really, like, women, our fear is being murdered. Our fear is not our feelings getting hurt.
Right. So in your relationship that
I was the aggressor in my, and I learned in that relationship that wasn't the way, and I left that relationship because I didn't, it had matured. And then I started designing. We had a daughter and she passed away.
I'm sorry.
And that was really hard, obviously. But right after that, I started designing, and that was 16 years ago. She would have been 16.
I'm so sorry.
And my whole life, it was like I was reassigned. Like, you thought that, I went into this whole thing thinking I was going to have this life. I was nesting and preparing and becoming softer, or thinking I was. And I really was about to get a whole lot harder.
Right.
And I guess the hardcoreness came out in the things that I made. Okay. And it resonated with a bunch of people that I grew up listening to that were, like, in my head, sisters to me. Okay. And that swept me off my feet.
So describe it to me. So where, like, the moment that you had that connection with your ability to design the way that you do, and resonate with people that you grew up listening to, when was it that impact hit you?
I had gone to a bereavement group, which was the worst thing I could have done at all. I don't know if you've ever been, but everyone sits around talking about how sad they are and how miserable, they can't make sense of everything that has happened to them. And so they go and
in my own head.
Yeah. Right. And we do that by ourselves, in the shower, at home, when we're waiting at a red light. Like, but the only good thing that came from that was that I learned about this woman who gave a talk. Her name is Ann Hood, and she wrote a book called The Knitting Circle, and she talks about healing through trauma, through designing, through creating. So she started knitting, and her husband paved their whole house in Connecticut, the driveway, all around the house, everything, anything he could pave, he paved. And they found this rhythm in the way that they healed by the step forward of just focusing on the next needle point and the next needle point. And that piqued my interest because I was always creative. I always curated jewelry. My outfits were always, top billing. And I really loved it. I really loved it. It was like showtime. Every time I went outside, it was like the best. Right. And I didn't get that kind of positive reinforcement at home, but I got it outside in the way that I looked and the effort that I put into myself.
Right.
And the love that I showed myself, and then looking back at it, it was my way of comforting myself. It was emotional support.
Healing.
Yeah, it was emotional support from everything the trauma that I accumulated as a child.
Right.
So I realized that, I could like make stuff because I have this inclination towards design. Let me try to make something. And so like I tried and I made these epaulettes, and glamour.com cited me as like the inventor, which is like a huge thing coming out of Queens, not having, any classical, wasn't classically trained as a designer. And that's pretty, that's really a big thing for me. It was then and it is now. And so I was like, wow. And then I was asked to make a bunch for Alicia Keys' world tour, the Freedom Tour.
Wow.
And then that was all within a couple weeks, maybe a month. And then she was on a stage in Brazil in my stuff. And I made that on my couch in Queens. Like, wow. And it just, that kind of started me on this really romantic, beautiful excursion of exploration and healing and forgiveness, and that repeating itself constantly.
Well, you said your mother was very, very talented, so maybe she lives through you with your jewelry design.
She does. That style that I gave you is named after her. It's called the Milena hoop.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you.
Fuck around and find out.
And I think so much of my background, I reimagine. I always say, like, I reimagine the Julie of my youth. So I reinterpret everything that I grew up wearing, saying, living, being in the jewelry that I make. And I guess that's why it's resonated with so many people, because they feel that emotional connection to it, the love of who we once were and what we have become.
And the time and the effort and the love you put into making it as well.
Yeah.
That shows that you care about your own brand as well.
Yeah.
So now, after this relationship that you left, and I'm assuming that's who you had the baby with?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you go where'd you go from there?
So I was in my apartment in Queens, and I was there, and it took quite a long time. I had continued success in terms of just all these women constantly wearing my things, like hundreds of pictures of them in my stuff, like constantly being, like reinforced that, I think the financial success was definitely not there. And I think the perceived idea was always like, oh, you must be paid because all these people wear your stuff. But that's, as we know, that is not
true.
Not true. The affiliations and the leverage can get you there.
Right.
The leverage, the language, creating the language to build a story so that you can have a presentable, reputable, respectable company. Yes.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
But that in itself will not pay the bills.
No.
But if you're smart, you can finesse it.
You finesse it, you maneuver, you meet the right people, the right time. I believe in divine timing.
Yes.
So
it was 10 years of healing before I actually made money.
Okay.
So it took 10 years.
It took 10 years, but you're healing, which is an everyday process as well, I think. Yeah. Have you healed from the emotional and the physical abuse from your dad? Is he still alive?
No, he's gone on. He's resting now. No, I don't know, because he sometimes he manifest. Your father manifests in the people that you date. Sometimes good, bad, or indifferent, whatever aspect of them that you may be aware of. They can be prevalent in the people that we date, and I think that sometimes he makes an appearance in my life in that way.
Okay.
And that's been, I have to clock it and I have to be careful.
Right. But you're aware of it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the most important part. Awareness is key.
But it's funny because as street as you are and as much as you've been outside, a guy could still sneak in past security somehow and get in your life and have a whole breakfast with you constantly and then turn out to be this whole other man.
Narcissism.
It's like beyond that.
Yeah, they're con men.
It's crazy.
Oh, it's absolutely insane. But as long as you're able to spot it.
Yeah.
Spot I do. You got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I definitely clock it a lot quicker now. And I think when I was younger, I would call it like emotion. This is like trauma bonding. Like we've bonded. This is my guy. Like he's traumatized me. And now I'm like, I get the ick. Right. Like I'm like, you don't got your shit together emotionally? Get the fuck away from me.
Right.
Get the fuck away from me.
Yeah, you can't put yourself out there for somebody who's just trying to pull you down.
They might get past like 3 months, 4 months, but then I remember who I am, and then how little they know of me. Because I always find also in relationships, like guys always talk about themselves, and you really have to let them talk about themselves. They really want to hear
themselves talk.
Yep. You really do. You gotta listen more. Yeah. They gotta be the main character, even though you're the one with the boobs.
Right.
With the nanny, all that. At home, they're the ones with the nanny. They're the ones with the boobs.
Right.
Like they really do act like, so you really gotta fall back when you're in a relationship and really pretend to be amused by these dudes. Like and look, I love men. I've had good relationships and ones that were very loving, but I will not stay in a relationship that is not. They might slick past like a couple months, but then I'm like, no, I mean, you gotta go.
You've come so far, so why welcome that back into your world when you've done everything to get it out of your world. And you say
I've moved thousands of miles away with no family in a state I'm not from, rebuilt my life.
Right. Yeah, you said awareness. Awareness is key. I believe that is the number one thing in a relationship you need to have, because you could see it coming that way. If you dummy down the little abuse from a narcissist, eventually you'll be caught in the vicious cycle of it.
No, they'll pull you right in. They're so good at it. They're like performers, they're
con men.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
Where are you now in relationships?
I feel I'm in a healthy place to date, and I love men, and I love conversations with them, and I welcome a positive relationship, but I will not welcome
absolutely
the
not.
opposite of that. I won't. I don't have time for it. I have built myself up to be, everything that I thought I was, everything I suspected myself to be, exactly where I am right now. And so if you're not coming with love and, just a little bit of interest about, how my day was and all that, you know what I mean? I don't have time for it. So I do welcome a positive, loving relationship all the time.
Right. No, of course. It has to be healthy, especially when you come from the trauma that you did. Yeah. You would, you want that love and attention and affection in the kindest way, not that pretend situation.
No.
That's wonderful to hear, though. And that you've pulled yourself out of that darkness and into a light where you design your jewelry. It's 10 years now that you're
16.
16 years.
Yeah, it's the same. So I started designing the same year that my daughter passed.
Okay.
So it's directly correlates with the birth. Like I just said last year, I was like, oh, it's my quinceañera. I'm wearing a quinceañera dress for you today.
Appreciate it.
But I was, it's 15 and a half. So February 13th would have been her birthday. So that's 16. So it's 15 and a half. So this year is like her quinceañera. So it directly correlates with, all of that. And I always say like my line is my baby, and people just think that I'm saying, just something cute, whatever.
Right. But the meaning behind it.
Yeah, but like the meaning behind it. And I think that, and I don't talk about, what motivated me to be a designer. It was really healing. I wanted to get out of this headset that I was in, this like horrible like nightmare that was really brutal. It was really, really brutal. And
could I ask how she passed? Okay. And move on.
Yeah.
Move on.
But she her name was Frankie Malin.
Oh, how beautiful.
Thank you. And Malin was a combination of my mother's name, Malena, and his grandmother, Evelyn, who's from, I think she's from Sheepshead Bay, his grandmother, Dottie. No, Evelyn. She was a twin, Evelyn and Dottie.
Okay.
And so
Beautiful
I combined.
name.
Yeah, thank you, Frankie Malin. Yeah, she was super beautiful. She had my eyes, well, my lashes and my hands, and I have little sausage fingers.
Oh, yep. Sausages.
Sausages.
Yeah.
It's incredible that I get anything done with these hands, but yeah, I don't think people realize, you know, the story behind, you know, my line. It's been around for a while. If you know about my line, then you know about my aesthetic more than you do about anything else. And I've kept style and grace at the forefront, and good, you know, good fashion and, you know, discretionary taste, and all of that is the most important thing always when it comes to my line and being a designer.
Well, I think just listening to your story is so inspirational for, you know, there's a lot of women out there that need that push, and you sharing your story right now is definitely a push for someone else. Absolutely.
I hope so. I mean, I know that I remember when it happens, I was in the supermarket like a week later, and I remember thinking, like, if this had happened to that woman there who was pregnant, she would have came back to work a week or two later here at the supermarket, maybe in a whack relationship, you know, with some guy that's a dick. And just, that would be her cycle, you know? And I thought about her, and I always think about her, and I'm sure she went on to have a healthy baby. But I think about women like that kind of thing happens to, and nothing amazing happens.
Uh-oh.
There's no gift.
No.
That's super sad.
It is super sad, but there is always a gift, and the gift is your life. And I think that's what we overlook and take advantage of. I know I have, in my past, always waiting for, you know, that sunshine.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't come, but I fail to remember that I have my life, which is a gift.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Somebody out there, some of the women out there don't experience the fabulousness or the beauty. They have a mundane life where they just follow routine. But I think if take a minute to smell the roses, even though I hated that saying my mother would say, you realize that life is a gift. You know?
Yeah, in itself, the breath we take and the opportunities that come our way and the chances to just be kind to other people that may be going through something worse, sadder. You know, it's like in New York, there's like a saying, like there's always someone's ass in your face, right? So they're always going up the stairs on the train, except Renee, because Renee takes a car service. It's a black car.
I wasn't allowed to. I wasn't allowed. My father would know. We grew up in Staten Island, so first of all, we don't have a train in Staten Island.
You have that,
we have the one that's above ground,
and I was always
takes
scared
you to
of
the
that
ferry.
I was always scared of that ferry because there was that one guy. Remember that story years ago? The guy ran off the boat. And he died in that thing.
I was on the ferry.
Everybody
when
heard
the
about
guy
that
was
story.
wielding the sword. Do you remember that years ago? And he stabbed the woman that was maybe like by that door.
My God, you were on that boat with him?
That's when my father said, you're not allowed to even take the ferry anymore. And he would have somebody drive me to work in the city. Swear to God.
I never met anybody that's 300% Italian, Renee.
Well, now you have. Now you have. No, I think your story is beautiful.
Thank you.
So let's rewind to losing your parents.
Yeah.
Because I also have lost my father. My mom's still alive, but my father obviously is now past 5 years.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So tell me about that experience for you.
My mom went first, and it was like a quick diagnosis. I was living in Chicago at the time, and we were informed that she had like this terminal illness. So I left everything behind, and I relocated to Miami where my parents lived. They had retired to Miami.
So they stayed together.
Oh, yeah.
With
43 years. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. My parents, nobody in my family, in my Cuban family, ever got divorced. Nobody. It was like a Catholic sin.
Right. I understand that. But did anybody on the outside know about the abuse in the household?
No, because I don't think so. Because my mom,
what happened,
she was,
here?
Yeah. There's the policy. That's why we don't talk about it in my family as adults.
Right. Okay.
It's like we don't, and we have the most beautiful nephews and niece, and we would, you know, the things that our parents, like what, you know, like what, like they're the cutest little things. Like how could you, even diss somebody like that. Like that's like 4, yo.
Right. No.
Like your outfit's whack. Like what?
There are
like,
some
who
mean.
says that?
There are some
like
mean
a little
people.
kid.
There's mean people in the world. There's very mean people in the world.
Chop their hands off, yo. That shit is horrible.
But it's real, so that's why I'm asking. So your parents stayed together.
So they
with all that.
they stayed together through it all. There was, never, my mom would never, and my dad went on to do he was like a workbook of like, if you want to be whack, you should read his book. You should read his book if you want to be super whack to everybody around you.
Really?
It's the manual.
Really? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he was super whack. But so that's a whack legacy, right? That's super whack. His legacy is that he's my dad, I think. You're welcome.
Listen, but look at you now.
Yeah.
Listen, your childhood wasn't peaches and cream, but you made a life.
He definitely made me brave, though. Like growing up, I definitely was not afraid of. I was always growing up. I was always involved in all kinds of scrapping and stuff, boys and girls, and I never. It was because of him. We used to call him DMX, Tupac Double-S.
Oh no,
he was out of his mind. But so, and it's funny because even though he was so horrible, there was something so charming about him. Even as I speak to him, he never said "I love you" to me.
Oh,
ever. Never. But my parents, they stayed together. My mom got sick. My dad unraveled. He didn't know how to react to losing his best friend, even though he was whack to her. He had no tools. And he was really, he was devastated.
Right.
And he didn't have the tools to like go to any doctor visits. He didn't know who her doctor was, what kind of treatment she was on. He didn't even know where the hospital was. Like he wasn't involved with anything. The only thing he controlled was the money. Okay. And so we had the credit card. We have to go to the supermarket. I get organic milk. He'd flip the fuck out. Like controlling, like maniac. Like right. They had a little bit of coin. They worked their whole lives and retired and, got a little spot in Queens, like they're good, right. They're okay.
Right.
And he just everything was a problem, and he just, that kind of energy. My mom's in a hospital, but it's going up and down. I'm lotioning her legs. I'm like being like, yo, the girl. Because everything that, like the problems that we had growing up, that shit was on the side. I didn't give a fuck anymore. That's my mommy.
Right.
That's my mommy.
Right, absolutely.
Nails done, lip gloss, popping, everything, doing her hair. I put her in the wheelchair. I'm like, you got to go prune the plants in the back. We got work to do, girl. Get in there. I'd force her to go to the supermarket with me and pick the milk and the fruits and shit.
Oh, God bless you.
My boo. Right. I only ever lost my cool with her once, and I was the one with her mostly. My sister had just had a beautiful baby boy and was really focused. My brother was, living next door and coming back and forth and helping, of course. But I slept in the bed with her. I held her hand.
Right.
I'm like, you want me to hold you, mommy? I'll hold you. And I would just fucking hold her. And it's funny because I think your kids when she always said, like, if I ever got sick, it would be the little one. I'm the youngest.
Okay.
That would be there for me.
And she wasn't abusive.
She was. She got pulled into that torrent of she was, but she was also, she always tried.
Okay.
She tried. She would try to fix it. She would try to, we fuck it up together.
Right.
Because at that point, I'm also like, this is foul, yo. You guys are wild. And then I was toxic in my own way.
Right.
And I was trying to have a relationship. How do you have a relationship with somebody that you love, but that's so mean to you? How do you navigate that?
Well, you know what? I've had no success at all, so I would not. I would not be the person to give you the advice on that, except for they're not the one.
No,
they're not the one.
Yeah, but how do you do that when that person's your mother? How do you do that when that person is your father? I think my parents were so overwhelmed with responsibility, being in another country they're not from. My mom was a refugee. There was so much happening. My dad was wild. And there wasn't really time for intervention.
Right.
Like I really raised myself when it came in terms of like what's right, what's wrong, how to be with people and all that, And so my parents, my mom going back to Miami, my parents, it was very difficult for my dad, and my mom just got sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker, and she passed away. And that was really hard, but it was also 9 months of taking care of somebody else and my whole life on hold. And I was there when she passed, so I was very lucky.
Right.
All of her children were there, and my nephew was there, the baby. He's now the oldest. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. I wouldn't have not have been there to see her through. I was there when my daughter died, when my mother died, when my dog died. And so I feel like it's so, like, to be a shepherd to someone when they're crossing over so much uncertainty, but also so much rest to be had for my mother, because she was so sick, and she was so tired of being sick, and she was a super motivated person. She was social, and she would participate in the fashion shows at her senior center. She was getting it. She was that girl. She had friends. Her best friend was gay. Her other homegirl had tattoos, smoked weed. I'm like, mommy, Miami's crazy for you right now.
Absolutely.
You're outside, mommy.
So would you say that ultimately she lived a healthy life?
She did. I asked her, I said, Mommy, do you think you had a good life? She said, I had a great life. I've had a great life. Wow. So I think she really felt fulfilled, and in her life,
of everything, she was able to push.
Even my mom that's sick, my dad was on his way to the supermarket to get us non-organic milk, of course. and I was like, oh, it would be so amazing of you, it would be so fly of you, it would be so amazing if you got mommy flowers. He never got her flowers. I'm not buying her. We don't have money for flowers. Like a lunatic. Like, this bitch is dying, yo.
Wow.
Put on a tux, yo.
Right.
Today's the day. Showtime.
Show up. Right.
No, couldn't do it.
Yeah, but
couldn't show.
What
nothing.
was his family like?
I don't know much about, they were in Greece, and I didn't know much about my dad's family. I know my dad got a 3rd grade education. He lived by the port, which is like living in the city. He was super scrappy. He was a wrestling champion.
Right.
Of his weight division in Greece.
So do you think that he didn't have the right upbringing?
No.
Well, obviously the 3rd grade, education. My father too was like, 7th grade was the furthest he went.
He grew up in Sicily?
Who?
Your dad?
No, they're from America, my parents.
Okay.
It was my grandparents. Sicilian,
okay.
Yeah. So I know my father didn't have the best upbringing either, because he was always in the street. So I think sometimes they're dealt a hand, and that's the hand that they play.
Yeah.
How long after your mom passed did your dad pass?
So he lived another 5 years in agony, really in agony. Just like being by himself. And I was trying to be a good daughter, so I would fly down once a month to hang out with him. He was brutal every time I went. And I was still trying to rebuild myself after my great loss, and then my mother. My mom passed maybe 5 years after my daughter, I think. I think that's the timeline. I'm not sure. So I couldn't really rebuild myself.
Can't heal where you were hurt.
Nah.
It's a fact. Nah. You cannot heal.
Yeah, and he wouldn't hold it down. He would wait until we would be in the car, and then he would start talking crazy to me, like crazy nonsense. Like none of it was true. None of it was true.
Right.
And he was just out of his mind. And
maybe he was legitimately.
No, he definitely was. He definitely was. He's like, everything's a point of contact. Everything's a fight. He comes from being a fighter.
Right.
So everything is a confrontation, and I'm not like that.
Right.
And so it was just conflict. But so I stopped. I wrote him a letter. I dissed him. And then I never went back. I told him about it. I wrote him his fucking rights.
You told him about himself.
Oh yeah, all the way. I didn't hold anything back.
Okay.
And I kind of hatched a plan to move to Los Angeles to further remove myself, leave New York, and just start fresh and see what I could do out here, not really knowing anybody. and going off of this line, and this little line I have, this little cred, this little, this little story about, whatever.
It's not a little story. It's a big story. And I think you should do more interviews because your message is one of hope, hope and healing. And the fact that you were able to pull yourself out of such an abusive household, learn that you had the same little demon in you, and then remove that from yourself and kept going. You have a story of hope. You do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. But so he eventually got into some kind of crazy accident. It was like some kind of intervention, like God was calling him or something, and he got away with his life. And then I guess a couple days later, he was weak from it, and was crossing the street, collapsed, and then ended up in the hospital again. They said everything was fine. Then they called us an hour later. I think they did something and they messed something up. I don't know what happened, but he didn't really have anyone there advocating for him, which doesn't help. Right. Just being in a hospital. He had burned the bridges pretty much with everybody.
Right.
And then I was in touch with him, and then I was like, okay, I guess like I probably should go down. And it went from bad to worse, and he got, he was like paralyzed or something. It was like pretty bad for somebody that was so physically active, in bad ways. And he called me one day, and this is kind of euphoric or ethereal. And I called him, and just to check on him. And I had plans to go down and see him and spend time with him, because I knew it wasn't sounding good, because he was already 86 at that point. He was already
oh wow, he lived a very full life.
Lived a full life.
Right.
And he answered the phone. He was like, oh my God. He's like, your mom was just here. I was like, what do you mean mommy was just there? And I was like, well, shit, I better get down there, because when they start seeing dead people, they say you gotta, they're about to be out. And I was like, what do you mean you saw mommy, Mom? He's like, how did she find me from the cemetery? We cremated my mother, but he.
Oh wow.
He's like, how'd she find me? She looked beautiful. She was just like a princess, like Italian. She looked like a queen, like Italian queen. And he said, but her hair in the back was a little messed up, and she was holding a baby.
Wow.
Who's that baby? It was like, doesn't put it together.
Right.
And I'm like.
Wow.
And he said she was fixing and adjusting his bed. And she said to him, you like your bed? Rest. And I didn't put it together until a friend of mine a couple days later, she was like, do you know what your mom was telling your dad? I was like, no. She said, your mom was saying to your father, you like your bed, no lie in it. And I think that's what she was saying, because my mother was the type.
Okay.
She was the type. She was there adjusting his bed.
Or maybe she was preparing his bed for him to cross over.
My mother was very like Latina, very hoop earrings.
She was definitely laying your fucking bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was, because she's definitely the type, like, she would nurture you, but she also would tell you what time it was.
Right.
Like he didn't eat chicken. She fed him chicken all the time. Fuck this motherfucker. He didn't eat pork. She fed him pork.
Okay.
You stay in the marriage. She was
getting her lick back no matter what. She was getting her lick back.
She put him on a budget, like $100 a week. They had plenty of money. We don't have enough money. She's eating out every day. She's balling. Okay. She's at the mall. She's at Macy's, fucking it up at the sales rack. Like, my mother wasn't playing.
Well, it's a pleasure to know that you've pulled yourself away from it, and you've made something of yourself that you didn't think, or that you did think you were about, but didn't have the courage and the strength back then, and now you do. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And then just tell everybody where they can find your jewelry.
Yes. So thank you for having me. This was amazing. I don't talk a lot like this, so this is a real treat for me to just, and I think, like, as you say, making light of it. And I was thinking of that,
trauma, but to make your trauma feel
and I was
lighter.
thinking that as I was driving here, I was like, maybe if I'll talk, talking about it, some of it, because it does come up, like it is a journey, as you say. And maybe it will help release some of the, just whatever that I have. But my jewelry, it's my line. It's Seville Michelle, and it's just on my website or on social media. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This has been another episode of the CrySis Queen with yours truly, Renee Graziano.